Don't be a dead end. When somebody asks you for something, don't say, no, sorry, I don't do that, or I can't help with that, or no, that's not possible. Put them in touch with somebody else, because then again, you're proving yourself to be a resource. No, you know what? Actually, that's not something that I can do, but I can put you in touch with so and so that should be able to help you get that done.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert, and today's guest is very unique in the sense that he has his own podcast who reaches a very similar audience. So really excited to engage with him today. He's an energetic, certified safety professional who's all about sparking innovation and crafting practical solutions. He is the co-host of the Illusion of Safety podcast, where the conversations are dedicated to bringing community to the safety industry. He worked his way up the ladder and is now the Senior EH&S Manager at Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Please welcome Josh Russell to the show.
Jay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you, Josh. Very excited.
Awesome.
So I think the biggest topic that we kind of touched on recently was the fact that you're in an EH&S leadership role. And if you could speak about how you've kind of unpacked or understood the complexities of EH&S and facility management and how the two marry up with each other.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The department that I lead, we oversee safety as it relates to biomedical research, but also facilities, construction, contractors, et cetera. And I think holistically, the approach that I've tried to teach and also foster myself is one where we shift from gatekeepers to facilitators. We're trying to help streamline things and support facilities teams or researchers or whomever we're trying to support. The word that I commonly use is concierge. Concierge is someone who helps to make things get done, or to help, facilitate things getting done, and to make sure it's done smoothly with a good experience. And that's kind of how I like to see myself. I try to be a solution-oriented partner to help enable facilities teams to achieve their goals efficiently and safely, which in turn fosters a safer and more harmonious work environment.
Makes sense. If I could roll back slightly, so kind of set the stage for what have you seen outside of how you practice EH&S and outside of how well you get along with facilities management? How does that, what made us land on this topic? Why was this relevant and important, Josh?
So early on in my career, I started to see that there was this clear divide between facilities and safety. It's fascinating. In the safety world, there's so much discussion about who safety should report to. And everybody says they should not report to facilities because there's always this divide, right? And I think it's actually a perceived divide, but it's a divide that's caused by the way some people operate. That's the way that I see it in my own head. Facilities personnel are usually people that are seen that are doing the job and getting things done and keeping things operating. And often safety people are seen as the people who are regulators, or as people like to call them the safety cops. And so that's my tagline is I'm not a cop, I'm a concierge.
Right.
And especially in my current role, when I started there early on, I saw that there was a major disconnect between the two. And so the first thing that I did, and this is before I had some sort of framework in my head for how this could be done. I said, well, what have I been good at? This far in my career has been people. I may not know all the technical stuff. I know a good bit about it at this point, but I may not know it all. But what I do know is how to build relationships. And so I immediately started building relationships. And what did that mean for me? It meant having very simple conversations. Hey, how's your day going? What'd you do this weekend? In some instances, some people choose not to do this, but I used Facebook more than a way of posting silly things, I do post silly things, but instead of a way of like, looking to see what other people are into just for my own, make myself feel better. I started connecting with people that I worked with so that I could simply learn a little something about them. Oh, their child plays basketball. Oh, they went to a soccer game over the weekend. These are their interests.
Mhm.
And even if that's not somebody's cup of tea, finding out what somebody's interest is so you can even have a baseline conversation just to form those relationships. Because as soon as you form a relationship, you can start building that trust. You can start building that communication. Those are the two
Mhm.
pillars of a relationship in the first place. And so I think that's the first step, is to have a relationship, and you can't have that if you're always butting heads, or if you have a combative approach to the way that you do work. And I think that's been a major problem with a lot of folks that I've experienced along my way, is that they see themselves as one thing, and when in reality they should be operating completely different.
Great insights. Um, what I also hear that you actually care. I would use the word empathy, right?
Yeah.
For maybe what they're going through, what they care about.
Yeah. I care. That is one of, oh man, I'm so passionate about that word in general, and I guess we'll talk more about that.
No, say more.
But the thing is that I think that's part of the problem, is people don't care what someone else's experience is. They're only thinking about what their own objective or their agenda is. I have to make sure we're checking this box because that's the compliant thing to do. But we're not having these discussions with the people who are actually having boots on the ground that have to do the work, and not taking into account what it takes for them to get that work done. And I think that's part of the problem. When you have these discussions, hey, I'm not a facilities person. So in no way should I really be dictating to somebody how they do their work. What I need to do is talk to them, help them as the expert. And people love it when you recognize that they are the expert,
Hmm.
and I'm here to learn from you.
Hmm.
Can you help me understand what the challenges are that you're facing? Because I'd love to come up with a collaborative solution for you to be able to do this work, but for us also to make sure that it's done safely. Because I care that we recently had a guest on our podcast. They said that instead of saying, I want you to go home the way you came, they said, I want you to want to come back to work tomorrow.
Mm.
And I thought that was really deep, right? And so
Hmm.
I think showing that care and helping and showing that you really want to understand what they're going through, to understand their experiences, and then to come to, to have proactive collaboration where you're developing solutions together, is the key to all of this.
That's a great framework. I like the change in verbiage, if you will, mindset, right?
Yeah.
Go home the way you came, or want to come in tomorrow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you think of any particular situations, maybe for the listening audience, because really kind of land it in terms of course, the overall makes complete sense, Josh.
Mhm.
Any scenarios that have played out where you could actually, walk us through like this? This is what would have this could have been a difficult situation, but it played out this way because.
So two things that I took on when I first got into this role. One was I wanted to find out who the most difficult people were in facilities when it came to safety. And those are the first people that I started trying to build those relationships with, because I felt like if I could get those, well, I've been doing this for 30 years, fellas, on board with what I was trying to do, it'd be a lot easier to win over the folks that actually were probably either on the line of doing what I needed them to do, or would follow the folks who were setting that example.
Hmm.
And then and so I did that. I built those relationships. Just had conversations with the guys. I talked to them and said, hey man, I'm be honest with you. I don't understand exactly what you're doing, but could you walk me through that? Cause I really do want to have a better understanding before I say, hey, don't do this and don't do that.
Hmm.
And I hate all of that. Um, Now I recognize as a safety professional, my job is to make sure that things are done safely, but there are two ways of doing it. Or there's tons of ways of doing it, but the wrong way is just saying, do this or else.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
the other thing that I did is I realized that there wasn't a whole lot of contractor oversight. And so our facilities team they'll contract with vendors to come in and do a lot of, construction or renovation work and things like that. And so my first meeting, I wanted to bring in either supervisors or safety personnel from each one of these vendors. And I call this meeting and we get in a room, and I find myself, basically talking about what our safety expectations are here. And I looked around that room and I said, there's not one person in this room that's engaged in this conversation right here. It's just
Hmm.
another safety person up here telling me what I can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to figure out a different way of doing this. So what I did is I started lining up these quarterly workshops and talks. We had talks, and I'll talk about that. Um, it was really convenient because the place I work is called the location that I'm at is called Janelia Research Campus.
Mm-hmm.
And so Janelia Occupational Safety and Health, oddly enough, the acronym is Josh. So that worked out really good. So we had what was called the Josh Show, the Janelia Occupational Safety and Health Show.
Love it.
But what I would do is I would facilitate some sort of workshop where I would place representatives from different kinds of trades at tables with a safety professional from the department, and they would work through some sort of safety plan together. But I was really doing that because I wanted to build in that muscle memory and the mindset of thinking through their work holistically, and also from somebody else's viewpoint of, how do we do this and do it safely? How do we plan the work and do it, plan it safely from the beginning? Because a lot of times they're trying to figure that out as they're going. But the other thing is I wanted to build that community. So there was a safety person at each table, and they're seeing, hey, these people are actually humans, right? They're kind of cool. They're talking to me. They're not telling me what to do. They're helping me through something. And I wanted to see the safety people in a light of helpers and not dictators. And then we would go into a session where we would have have people give talks, and I would invite reps from different companies. I'd say, hey, have you had an instance in your experience of a safety incident or something along those lines that you'd like to share that experience? And so they would do that. They shared their experience. And then for one of the final ones, I had representatives from different companies come up and give safety talks about things that they had learned throughout the process. So I took them from the community building, the relationship building, to the point where they were learning together interactively, to then where they were sharing, and at the end they were the teachers. And that's how I said to them, I said,
Brilliant.
you don't need us to teach you anymore. You're now the teachers, right? And so going through that process, and that probably took about a year and a half or something like that. It was, it was a pretty drawn out. But I think investing that time, and not everybody has that time, I understand that, but investing that time built relationships that still to this day, I have people, some of those vendors will reach out to me, hey man, you really changed the way that I see safety. And I see that it can be completely different than what I had ever experienced prior to those experiences. So
Nice work, Josh. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. Couple follow-up questions then. If it's a quarterly workshop as opposed to a one-time, this is our safety policy, this is what to do, how to do it, right? You made
yep.
that shift. Okay. So if it's a quarterly, is this for both, you might have said it, both outside vendors and in-house employees, or it is, yes?
Yeah, it was internal facilities employees, external vendors, either safety or supervisor reps, and then our internal safety team all together for these workshops.
Got it. So
Yep.
for the listening audience and my knowledge, how did you built it through relationships? How did you find what stumbling blocks, if any, did you find to get people to engage with, oh boy, this is a quarterly commitment now. Like it's a big commitment of time, clearly worth it. But can you walk us through maybe a little bit of the best practices to get something like that going?
Oh man, I had started the relationship building myself way before that. So I think that's another benefit of having a relationship, is that when you have a connection with somebody, you are typically invested in their success. They're invested in your success. It's a reciprocal relationship. And so once you've done that, it's a lot easier to ask somebody to do something, because at that point they're doing it because they want to, not because they're being told to. So I
Great.
think that really was the key to making that happen.
Outstanding. That's outstanding. And you found now, well, actually, so if you want to go to the data, if you don't mind, have you found that performance has increased or compliance, will you, if you will, as in, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my mind, it was I would have described it as the wild, wild west, or like a circus when I first got there. And I think it's a pretty well-oiled machine. I mean, nothing's going to ever be perfect, but
Right.
it's certainly leaps and bounds better than it was the way that I found it.
Outstanding.
Yeah. It took
Um,
work. It took work by many, right? It was a collaborative effort. There were so many people. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I think, there were so many people, but I do, I give all the credit to the relationships. And it was from the relationships that all of that was able to happen.
It's amazing to me, regardless of topic, whether it's on the show, whether it's on the job, or back at home, relationship, it always comes back to relationship and actually caring about the other person in the conversation or in the transaction or the relationship or the work. Um, yeah, it's amazing how it just, if you take the time to build that, clearly you're seeing the results that you're
Yeah.
getting from it.
Yeah. I mean, the saying, your network is your net worth. I believe in
Hmm.
that wholeheartedly. You know what I mean? Because I don't think anybody has any kind of success without help from a network, whatever that looks like to them.
Completely agree. I'm still fascinated by you cracked the nut of the relationship of EH&S and facilities, and I don't want us to move past that. If there's any more to say about, there are complexities there. There are at times arguably very different motivations, right? Something
Yep.
has to get done. Oh, it must get done safely. We see it in our world every day. Are there any points there that any other nuggets that you've picked up along the way here, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying early on, I think two of the pillars for any successful relationship is trust and communication. And I think
Hmm.
those things you have to build those. And so one of the ways to build that trust is to follow through on commitments. You can say that you're going to do these things, but if you don't do them, you're going to lose that credibility right off the bat. You got to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk, and make sure that you do that. And then be very clear with your communication. Communicate effectively, tactfully, in a way that the recipient understands. That's warm and it's just there's so much tone lost in emails too. And I understand we work in a digital world, but when you can to have those communications face to face, so somebody can see, oh, this guy actually or this person actually means what they're saying to me, and it's not just a couple sentences in email. But I mean, I obviously use email, but I even though that I'm an older fella, I still try to throw in a bunch of emojis, just so that I can they can see that there is some emotion in there.
Well done. Face to face and follow through. I
Yeah.
like basically, yeah, here I'm hearing do what you say you will do.
Yeah. The other thing's visibility. You
Hmm.
can't lead a war from an armchair. Like I heard that term early on when I was younger. I grew up on a military base for some years.
Hmm.
Can't lead a war from an armchair. And the thing there with safety is that if you're not out there talking with people, being visible, helping them through things, and you're just dictating things from another room. You come around once in a while with a clipboard and then you walk away. That's not effective. You're not going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Military base. What branch?
My stepdad was in the Air Force, so I lived at Dover Air Force Base for about 10 years.
And we thank him for that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
I don't love Dover, but that was cool being on the base.
your podcast focus, and again, the illusion of safety.
Yeah.
Could you explain why you named it the illusion of safety and maybe some things that have come up in that discussion? Because I do believe this all ties together very nicely.
Yeah, there's two things that kind of the illusion of safety. Where does that come from? One is that we didn't want it to be just another safety podcast where we're talking about, well, regulation such and such, and just nerding out on regulations. We wanted it to be where we have guests on that maybe guests that don't even work in the safety realm, but we wanted to learn from others' experiences and see how that could actually tie back to our profession. And there's people out there that have tons of different kinds of experiences, but in the end safety is a big part of all kinds of work. And so we wanted to be able to talk to people like that and also to have people from safety in different industries, counselors, and we've got some TEDx talkers that are going to be coming on. Just to be able to have those shared experiences, not hear the same thing over and over. The other thing is that there is a major problem we feel in our profession where there is an illusion of safety. And that goes back to my clipboard, tell you what to do. But in reality, how effective is that program? And that,
Mm.
it all goes back to a safety person's only effective as the relationships that they've built.
Now, a thought that just came up, thank you, is time and money. How
Hmm.
did you, and I realize it's probably going to all stem back to relationship, but is there anything else around, like what I've seen in the world of facilities is, well, to do it safely, which is, by the way, our number one priority, everyone must go home or want to come to work the next day for that reason. It will sometimes cost a little or a lot more money and a little or a lot more time. How do you handle those situations? Relationship, of course. Is there anything else there to talk about?
That's another thing we talk about internally, the podcast group, is that safety people need to be better at selling.
Hmm.
Because when you go into the C-suite or whatever group it is that you're talking to, and they want to talk about, they want to hear, what's this mean in dollars? They don't want to, does it feel good? They probably don't really care about it feeling too good often, right? They want to hear, what's this translate into when we're talking about production, when we're talking about return and things like that. And so we in my field, we need to get better at selling. But part of that is being able to show them that, when you do have this type of incident, when we do have these kinds of accidents, when these kind of operations are shut down because it wasn't done right, because somebody did something unsafe, we need to be able to show what that return is or what the cost is, um, when those kind of incidents happen. And I think that's usually an easy sell when you look at it
Mhm.
from that perspective. But I just don't think a lot of people are effective at framing it the right way. And this goes into, making sure that you're crafting your communication and crafting your pitches or whatever it is that you're
Mhm.
doing so that it matches the needs of the person that you're giving it to.
Would it be fair to say, and that makes a ton of sense, would it translate to explaining the why?
Yeah,
Why would you?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Why? Yep.
Yeah.
And
Why would I
but
spend that time? Why would
that's
I
right.
spend that money?
If I'm being completely honest, it's because it's the right thing to do.
Of
But
course.
that answer doesn't satisfy many people that are the
Mm-hmm.
big decision makers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. More context. Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course, it's the right thing to do.
right.
Um, I might jump around a little bit here with you,
Yeah,
Josh, but
sure.
you have a lot to offer us. So I believe you mentioned earlier on that you wrote or developed a 4 hour and an 8 hour class.
Yeah.
Can you
Um,
talk about those?
yeah, actually, I'll give you the background on how one of them came about, and then I'll talk about the class. For some time now, I've been in safety for about 21 years. Early on, I did things the same way that everybody else did them, and I realized that wasn't effective, so I started looking for different ways to do it. But one of the things that I noticed for years and years, and I still see this today, is that people use these, well, they'll do like safety training or try to get a message across, and they use this terrible image of somebody with their arm chewed off in like a lathe or, something like that. And they'll say, hey, don't do that again, or else this will happen to you. And it really ticked me off. I did not like that. I didn't think it was effective, but I didn't know why. I just knew that it didn't make me feel like it was the right thing to do. So I started really digging into the concept of scare tactics. And I came up with a tagline that was use care tactics, not scare tactics.
Love
Um,
that.
and I started really digging into, like, why would I not use scare tactics? Is there a reason? Is there a reason? And so I started researching the idea of an amygdala hijack. So that is that's a biological function in our brain. That's the fight or flight.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, well, what triggers that? And so fear, stress, anxiety, etc. And so there's data out there from research, like Scared Straight, the show Scared Straight, where they
Mhm.
would try to scare them into going straight. They actually had a higher reincarceration rate than folks that did not go through that program, which I thought was quite fascinating. So what I did first is I said, well, you know what? What do we need more than anything? We need leadership. And so I developed 8 hour curriculum. My buddy helped me with some of it. An 8 hour curriculum for a class called Leading with Care Tactics. And CARE stands for collaborative, authentic, radical, and engaged. Because we got to be collaborative. If you don't show up as yourself and you're not authentic, people aren't going to trust you because people got a pretty good meter for people being fake.
Mhm.
The radical is people, we need to think differently. Like I've been talking about all along, we got to figure out ways of doing things differently because a lot of stuff, the way it's been done is not effective. So we got to think outside the box and think of innovative ways of solving problems. And then the engaged is, people will also notice that we can say all the things that we want. We can say that we care. We can say that um, they're there for them and that we understand. But if we're not showing that we're actually really engaged in our work, people will pick up on that. And so we got to also be engaged. So that's kind of where that talk came from. And I developed an 8 hour leadership curriculum that I've taught at conferences. I've got another conference I'm teaching it at in August. I've taught it to some of the management teams at my job. And so I really enjoy that one. It's kind of a science-based approach for changing the way that we lead people and showing that we actually do care about them. But it also preaches self-care and accountability, because we can't show up engaged if we're not taking care of ourselves. So it's not just taking care of others, it's also taking care of ourselves. The 4-hour class that I developed curriculum for is called Seeing is Believing. I often say to my team and to others is that in my mind, life is all about navigating the realities of others. Because we all have our own reality. It's the way that we perceive things, the way that we perceive the world, the way that we perceive how people behave, and the way that things occur. But it very often is different than the way somebody else sees the exact same situation. And then there's then there's a disconnect. And so once we realize that people see things differently and that we need to try to understand and see things from their perspective in order for there to be the things we've talked about, collaboration and effective relationship building, we're going to be a lot more effective. It's like is this dress blue? Is this dress black or brown? Like that image that went
Yes.
around for so long.
Mm-hmm.
That in my mind, that's life. You and I could have the exact same experience right now, but we may see it completely different from the way, from each other. And so I think now, is there a way of solving that? I think the way of solving it at first is to be mindful that exists, right? So first we got to say it is something. I took a leadership class one time where they said, you're always better at something once you name it, give it a name. Well, I want to call it George. I mean, whatever you want to name it. Because once you name it, you can hold it in your hand and it's either easier to recall and be able to use it in a moment when you need to use it. So I think, building that mindset, building a muscle memory so that we understand, what, they're probably seeing this differently than me. Let me have that conversation. Hey, how did you see that situation play out? Or how do you see this thing that's happening right now? I kind of want to understand it from your perspective. And people love that because that does show that it shows genuine care. I want to understand how this thing affected you and how you see it so that I can maybe behave differently in the future.
We could talk about this for hours. It's so fascinating to me, the psychology of it, how effective or non-effective it can be if you don't exercise it properly. This is brilliant stuff. I'm always fascinated by this, Josh, because it doesn't really matter the topic. You could be at home. I mean, we don't change as human beings, right?
Yeah.
Same thing at home as in your professional life. And, here professionally at Colludus, we're also going through something where we're identifying the people on our team and how they think. And, how should we be listening to these people or this person? Because if we're not in tune with that, if we, like you said, name it, like, what is this? Listen and understand before trying to project, and really getting into someone's listening or their understanding of the world.
Yeah. It's fascinating when we say we have a project we're working on, or we have a task that we're working on, and you're like, oh my gosh, that guy takes forever. Why does it take him a week to do this thing that I can do?
Because he needs all the data before he can make a decision.
Because they need all the data before they can make a decision. Here I am. I'm an idea guy, right? Like I have these ideas. Hey, here's this great idea. Okay, now you guys go do it, because I don't like being in the weeds. I don't like having all the data. I don't like to have to mess with all that. I love to have the ideas, but I think that it takes everybody. It takes all types. But figuring out how those people work, what their methods of communication are, what is it that makes them happy? What is it that makes them tick? What makes them feel appreciated and recognized and successful, and all of those things. And I think that's important for a leader to figure those things out about their teams, because then you can take a tailored approach for each individual, and that will help them in turn to be successful, to be engaged in their work, and it improves retention, which impacts organizations really, really in a big way.
Absolutely. And if what happens, like conversely, the person who needs all the data before they decide or they move forward, well, if the idea person is always running forward, they could leave a wake of destruction behind them because they didn't consider all the potential outcomes.
For sure.
So, like you said, we need every type of person to truly be successful.
My assistant manager at work, he is that guy. He is the data, thinks through things very deeply. He's very thoughtful. And I love that. I appreciate that. And I recognize that. It took me a while to figure that part out. But I run a lot of things past him. I'll say, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I'll say something to the rest of the team. We're going to do this. And then I look at him and I'll try to look for a facial expression to see if he's telling me something. And I say, hey, what are your thoughts about this? And he'll share, and then I'm like, oh, you know what, I like that idea. That's pretty good. But I think leaning on others also, that's really important.
Good on you being in tune with him.
Yeah.
It's perfect. And consulting with him. Can we just jump back to the amygdala hijack moment for a minute? Like maybe expand on that a little bit, Josh?
Sure. So when this idea initially came to me, it was because I kept seeing safety people use these gory pictures in their training presentations, and it just bothered me. And so I started digging into it. And so what I found when I started researching this more, now I'm blessed that I work in an organization where there's a lot of focus on neuroscience. So I can actually pick the
Mm.
brains of some of the greatest neuroscientists in the world. And so what I found out was that amygdala hijacks, uh, it reduces retention, it reduces impact, because what it does is it prevents information from going to the prefrontal cortex, which is where you do your decision making, your executive, decisions, your thoughtful thinking, your processing, etc. So that was my initial thought. Oh, I'm going to get people to change the way they do training because they're doing these things. This could stress people out. People do get freaked out by pictures like that. And then what's happening? Safety training, which already sucks most of the time, is even less effective because of this, right? Nobody walks out of there remembering anything because one, people aren't presenting it in a way that is engaging. It's just PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, or, talking the whole time and about regulations. And nobody, look, I'm a safety guy and I don't want to hear about that for an hour. But the other thing is they're showing these pictures, and I was like, oh, you know what? This actually could be impacting retention. And it's the retention that we need because we need folks to be remembering these things when they're working every day. And so I started diving into it from there. And then when I got into the leadership side of things, I started thinking about the way that leaders impact their followers, or managers impact their employees.
Sure.
We could be severely impacting the way that an employee operates, the way that they feel about their work and things like that if we're operating from a position of scare.
Mhm.
If you do this again, you're going to get fired, and things like that. And I
Mhm.
think that's really where I took that.
Great explanation. Great walkthrough. Couldn't agree more. Um, we could probably go on for hours. And before I shift on us here, I'm going to shift a little bit. Anything more on that relationship? I know I've gone back to it a couple of times, but it's so critical. It's so prevalent in
Yep.
facility and properties. Anything more on the safety and facility manager FM role at all? And if there isn't, that's fine. We move right on. But any other aspects that you've picked up along the way?
I mean, I think part of it is that make yourself available to also do favors for others. In
Hmm.
that, as safety people, we're asking for things constantly. Hey, I need you to
Mm-hmm.
do this. I need you to put your safety glasses on. I need you to wear a welding helmet. I need you to, use fall protection and things like that. I think you need to figure out ways to make it so that they can lean on you for things. And so then it shows that it is, like I was talking about relationships being reciprocal. You got to give and receive in order for a relationship to be successful. So I think
Yeah,
that's the other thing is don't be the one that's always asking for something. Be the one that's also giving something that's of need for the
I
other
think
person.
that's great psychology right there. And I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, is there any examples you can think of? Because that's like what would the audience might be wondering, okay, well, what could EH&S, what could safety do for me? Because you're right, it is. Get those safety glasses on. Why isn't your respirator? Where are the steel toe shoes or protective shoes? What are some ways you could shift that seesaw, that balance a bit, or maybe the ways you have?
I mean, start simple. When I first started doing this, and I would show up with our facilities personnel to have conversations with them, and I was just having conversations. I wasn't doing any training or anything of the sort. I showed up with donuts. I mean, this is very simple. It's something that we can all do. But, somebody that's coming off an overnight shift and is about to get off at 6 a.m. and you show up at 5:30 with some donuts, they're usually pretty appreciative. But right away, you're showing that, oh man, they did something for me. And I wasn't even asking for anything yet.
Hmm.
Right. I hadn't even asked for anything.
Yep.
I started off with giving something. And then I started asking for things. But we work together. I think the other thing is that making sure you're involving the other party in the decisions. Hey, we need to start wearing fall protection. Can I bring a vendor in and have them demo some for you, and you see what's most comfortable, what you like the best, and then
Hmm.
I'll buy it for you. I think it's the very simple things like that is involving the others, so that
Hmm.
when the decision's made, there's actually buy-in if they've been involved throughout the process.
Outstanding. Brilliant. Brilliant. I do want to shift kind of like you've taught us so much, Josh, but quite a bit about your world, and I love the new ways of looking things, the courses that you've constructed. Love to learn more about that. Is there any one lesson learned that like really stands out for you over your years? So you're 21 years of doing this. If you were to pick, and I'm sure there's multiple, but one lesson that just like, yep, that's the one right there.
Don't be a dead end.
What do you mean by that?
Just don't be a dead end. When somebody asks you for something, don't say, no, sorry, I don't do that, or I can't help with that, or no, that's not possible. Put them in touch with somebody else, because then again, you're proving yourself to be a resource. No, you know what? Actually, that's not something that I can do, but I can put you in touch with so-and-so that should be able to help you get that done.
All right, small amount of applause. Hold on. Absolutely. Be a
Yeah,
resource, be a solutions portal, be that solving entity that I'm putting words in your mouth, but I couldn't agree more.
yeah.
Yeah. If
I
you
mean,
can't figure it out, find someone or something that can figure it out to that.
how
For
often
that.
can facilities say, no, we can't do that? No, we can't keep the boilers running. No, we can't keep the HVAC system going. Very
Mhm.
infrequently. And
Mhm.
so if on my side of the aisle, if I'm the person that's saying no, 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 how does that look to somebody who really doesn't usually have the option of saying no? You got to
Sure.
figure out ways of getting it done.
Great psychology, great care, great insight. Awesome, Josh. Um, can we learn a little bit about you?
Sure.
Like, well, now we know you're an amazing podcaster. We know you're very good at EH&S. We now know that you have a 4-hour, 8-hour course. What more in your life would you like to share with our audience?
Oh man, I'm a proud father of 2 kids. I spent I spent a lot of my time with extracurricular non-work activities, so like class curriculum and podcasting, and I just like to spend time with friends and my family and be thoughtful about how I can make an impact. I one of the things I like to think about is how can I leave a legacy, and so
Mm,
I think that's what I encourage a lot of people to do. Is my grandmother used to have a magnet on her fridge that said it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a second to destroy it. So I would tie that back also to what I was talking about with those relationships, especially between safety and facilities, is you can do 10 good things, but you're going to be remembered for the one thing you didn't do
sure.
that was good, right? But as far as leaving a legacy, that's what I constantly am trying to figure out. How can I leave things better than I found them? And so I spent a good bit of time trying to think about that and do things that hopefully in the end, that's what I've done, is left some sort of legacy.
Good for you, man. I think most of us would aspire to that and try to leave the best legacy possible.
Yep.
Josh, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, and I hope we talk offline a lot more.
Absolutely, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really awesome.
Of course. And for our listening audience, if you picked up any knowledge or nuggets from Josh today, please feel free to ping us. Actually, Josh, I meant to ask you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want follow-up questions or more information from you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Anybody, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to collaborate with them as well.
Outstanding. Well, this wraps up another exciting and interesting episode of Facility Rockstars. Until next time, hope you enjoyed. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.